I'm Claire Morgan, 28, the executive director of the Morgan Foundation for Youth Development, a nonprofit I built from nothing after years of struggling just to make ends meet. The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my cousin Derek adjust his designer tie, completely oblivious to the irony of him standing in my ballroom. The crystal caught the light from the chandeliers above, casting tiny rainbows across my black evening gown, the same gown that cost more than I used to make in 3 months when I was sleeping on park benches. Claire, darling, you've really outdone yourself. Derek's wife, Melissa, cooed, her voice dripping with the same false sweetness she'd used 5 years ago when she'd literally stepped over me outside their country club. Who would have thought little Claire would throw such an adequate event? The scent of expensive perfume and fresh orchids filled the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, but underneath it all, I could still smell the phantom odor of the cardboard I used to sleep on. My fingers found the small scar on my palm, a reminder of the night I'd cut myself trying to open a can of beans with a broken bottle opener behind a dumpster. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. I forced a smile, the kind I'd perfected during countless board meetings where men twice my age questioned every decision I made. Thank you, Melissa. I'm so glad you could make it tonight. The words tasted like ash, but my voice remained steady, professional. Derek's laugh boomed across the space between us. Well, when we heard about your little charity thing, we just had to see what all the fuss was about. Though I have to say, Claire, this must have cost a fortune. Are you sure you're managing the foundation's money responsibly? The same Derek who had once thrown a $20 bill at my feet and told me to get a real job instead of begging was now questioning my financial management. The memory hit me like a physical blow, the humiliation of scrambling for that crumpled bill while his friends laughed, the way the concrete scraped my knees through my torn jeans. Around us, the charity gala hummed with quiet conversation. 300 of the city's most influential people had paid $5,000 each to be here tonight, and every penny would go toward building transitional housing for homeless youth. The same youth I'd once been, invisible and forgotten. The foundation's finances are quite transparent, I replied, gesturing toward the silent auction tables where bidding had already reached 6 figures. Everything is audited quarterly by Morrison and Associates. Melissa's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. Morrison and Associates? Isn't that rather expensive for a small nonprofit? Small nonprofit. The words hung in the air like smoke. The Morgan Foundation had distributed over $12 million in the past 3 years, but to them, I would always be the girl who'd shown up at family gatherings in thrift store clothes, the one who'd asked Uncle Robert for a loan to pay for community college and been turned away because I was financially irresponsible. A server approached with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and I watched Derek's eyes follow the young man's movements. The server couldn't have been more than 19, probably working 3 jobs to pay for school. Just like I had been. You know, Derek continued, popping a caviar-topped cracker into his mouth, I always wondered what happened to you after you disappeared from the family functions. Mother said you'd probably ended up in some shelter or worse. The ballroom suddenly felt too warm despite the air conditioning. My chest tightened as I remembered the last family gathering I'd attended, Christmas dinner 4 years ago, when I'd been living in my car and hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. I'd shown up hoping for just a plate of food and maybe a couch to sleep on, but instead found myself the subject of whispered conversations and pitying looks. I found my way, I said simply. Clearly. Derek's gaze swept the room, taking in the ice sculptures, the live string quartet, the massive projection screen displaying photos of the youth we'd helped. Though I have to wonder how someone like you managed to pull all this together. Did you marry well? Find a sugar daddy? The question hit like a slap, but before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. Claire Morgan built this foundation with her own 2 hands and a brilliant mind for social innovation. I turned to see Senator Patricia Williams approaching, her silver hair gleaming under the lights. Behind her walked a man I didn't immediately recognize, tall, distinguished, with kind eyes that seemed to see everything. Senator Williams, I breathed, genuinely surprised. I didn't expect you to make it tonight. I wouldn't miss it for the world, dear. Your work with homeless youth has caught the attention of some very important people in Washington." She turned to Derek and Melissa with the practiced smile of a seasoned politician. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Senator Williams." Derek straightened, suddenly aware he was in the presence of real power. "Derek Morgan, Claire's cousin. This is my wife, Melissa." "Ah, family," the senator said warmly. "You must be so proud of Claire's accomplishments. The Morgan Foundation is being considered for a federal partnership that could bring in $25 million in funding over the next 5 years." I felt the blood drain from my face. $25 million. I hadn't heard anything about this. The man beside Senator Williams stepped forward, extending his hand. "Ms. Morgan, I'm James Crawford from the Department of Health and Human Services. We've been following your work very closely." As I shook his hand, I caught Derek's expression in my peripheral vision. His mouth had fallen slightly open, and Melissa looked like she'd swallowed something sour. "I'm sorry," I managed, "but I wasn't aware of any federal partnership discussions." Senator Williams smiled. "That's because they're highly confidential until the final approval comes through, which should be." She glanced at her watch. "Any moment now, actually. James here has been waiting for the call all evening." The ballroom seemed to spin around me. Federal partnership. $25 million. This was beyond anything I'd ever dreamed possible when I'd started the foundation with a $5,000 loan and a borrowed laptop. James Crawford's phone buzzed, and he glanced down at it. His face broke into a wide smile. "Senator, Ms. Morgan, I believe congratulations are in order." But before he could say another word, the lights in the ballroom suddenly cut out, plunging us into complete darkness. In the confusion that followed, I heard the sound of shattering glass, a woman's scream, and then Derek's voice, closer than it should have been, whispering something that made my blood run cold. "You have no idea what you've just walked into, little cousin." Emergency lighting flickered on, casting eerie shadows across the ballroom as security guards rushed toward the main entrance. In the dim red glow, I could see guests huddled together, their evening wear making them look like elegant ghosts. The scent of spilled wine mixed with the acrid smell of electrical burning, and somewhere in the darkness, I could hear Melissa's panicked breathing. Everyone remained calm. A security guard's voice boomed over a megaphone. "We're experiencing a temporary power outage. Please stay where you are while we restore full lighting." But Derek had vanished. One moment he'd been standing beside me, his whispered threat still echoing in my ears, and the next he was gone, swallowed by the chaos and darkness. Senator Williams gripped my arm, her political composure cracking slightly. "Claire, we need to talk privately." "Now." James Crawford was already on his phone, speaking in urgent, clipped tones to someone on the other end. I caught fragments: security breach, compromised location, and most chilling of all, she doesn't know. The main lights suddenly blazed back to life, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. Guests blinked in the sudden brightness, adjusting their formal wear and looking around nervously. But my attention was drawn to the silent auction tables, where several high-value items had been knocked to the floor. A Tiffany necklace worth $30,000 lay scattered in pieces across the marble. "Ms. Morgan," James Crawford approached, his earlier warmth replaced by something harder, more official. "I think it's time you learned the real reason we're here tonight." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" Senator Williams guided me toward a service corridor, away from the crowd. "The federal partnership I mentioned? It's not just about funding your foundation, Claire. It's about protection." "Protection from what?" "From your family." The words hit me like ice water. We'd reached a small conference room off the main ballroom, and James Crawford closed the door behind us. The sudden quiet felt oppressive after the chaos outside. 3 months ago, Crawford began, our financial crimes unit flagged some unusual activity connected to your foundation's donor database. Someone has been using your charity as a front to launder money through offshore accounts. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "That's impossible. I oversee every transaction personally. Our books are completely transparent. We know you're not involved," Senator Williams said quickly. But someone with access to your systems is. Someone who knows your security protocols, your banking information, your donor lists. The room felt like it was tilting. You think it's Derek? Crawford nodded grimly. Derek Morgan, along with several other members of your extended family, are part of a sophisticated money laundering operation. They've been using legitimate charities across the country as fronts, skimming donations and funneling dirty money through their systems. But Derek barely acknowledges my existence. He thinks I'm a failure, a beggar. That's what he wants you to think, Senator Williams interrupted. Claire, your foundation has processed over $12 million in the past 3 years. Do you have any idea how attractive that kind of legitimate financial flow is to criminals? My hands were shaking now. I thought about all the late nights I'd spent building the foundation, the sacrifices I'd made, the genuine good we'd accomplished. Hundreds of young people had found housing, education, hope because of our work. And now they were telling me it had all been contaminated by my own family's greed. The power outage tonight wasn't an accident, Crawford continued. We believe Derek was trying to access your computer systems during the chaos. Our tech team has been monitoring your network, and someone attempted to breach your financial databases at exactly 9:47 p.m. I glanced at my watch. It was now 10:15. What did they get? Nothing, thanks to the security protocols we installed last week. But Claire, this means they're getting desperate. The federal investigation is closing in, and they know it. A soft knock interrupted us, and my assistant Sarah peered through the door. Claire? I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a problem with the silent auction. Several items are missing, and... She paused, looking uncomfortable. Your cousin Derek was asking a lot of questions about our computer systems earlier. He said he was thinking about making a large donation and wanted to understand our financial processes. My stomach dropped. Where is he now? He left about 10 minutes ago. Said there was a family emergency. Crawford was already on his phone again, speaking rapidly to someone about surveillance and tracking. Senator Williams moved to the window, peering out at the hotel's parking garage. Sarah, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I need you to pull up our donor database. Check if there have been any unusual transactions in the past week. She nodded and pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. After a moment, her face went pale. Claire, there's a $50,000 donation that came in yesterday from Morgan Family Trust. But the weird thing is, it was processed through 3 different accounts before reaching us, and the original source is listed as an LLC I've never heard of. Morgan Family Trust. Derek's family had money, but they'd never donated a penny to my foundation before. In fact, they'd actively discouraged other family members from supporting my work. There's more, Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. The donation came with specific instructions that it be used for administrative costs rather than direct services. And it's scheduled to be transferred out again tomorrow morning to something called Meridian Development Partners. Crawford looked up from his phone. Meridian Development Partners is a shell company we've been tracking for months. It's connected to at least 6 other money laundering schemes. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Derek hadn't come to my gala to mock me or to see my success. He'd come to use my foundation as a washing machine for dirty money, probably assuming I was too naive or too grateful for any family attention to ask questions. We need to freeze that transfer, I said, reaching for my phone. Already done, Crawford replied. But Claire, there's something else you need to know. The money that's been flowing through your foundation? Some of it is connected to human trafficking operations. Young people, mostly runaways and homeless youth, the same population your foundation serves. The room spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table, fighting waves of nausea. My foundation, my life's work dedicated to helping vulnerable young people, had been used to profit from their exploitation. How long? I whispered. How long has this been going on? Senator Williams sat down across from me, her expression grave. We think at least 18 months. Maybe longer. 18 months. I thought about all the young people we'd helped during that time, all the success stories, all the lives changed. Had some of them been victims of the very crimes my foundation was unknowingly facilitating? There's one more thing, Crawford said quietly. We have reason to believe Derek isn't working alone. Someone inside your organization has been providing him with access and information. Someone you trust. Before I could process this latest revelation, Sarah's tablet chimed with an urgent notification. She glanced at it, and her face went white. Claire, she said, her voice shaking, someone just accessed our client database remotely. All the personal information for every young person we've ever helped. It's been copied. The silence that followed was deafening. Somewhere out there, Derek and his associates now had the names, addresses, and personal histories of hundreds of vulnerable young people. Information that could be used to find them, exploit them, or worse. Crawford's phone rang, and he answered it immediately. After a brief conversation, he hung up and turned to us with an expression I couldn't read. We just intercepted communications between Derek and an unknown associate, he said. They're planning to meet tonight at the old Riverside warehouse district. And Claire. He paused, meeting my eyes. They mentioned you by name. They know we're onto them, and they think you're the weak link that's going to bring down their entire operation. The rain had started by the time we reached the warehouse district, turning the cracked asphalt into a maze of puddles that reflected the sparse streetlights like broken mirrors. I sat in the passenger seat of Crawford's unmarked sedan, watching FBI agents position themselves around the perimeter of Warehouse 17 through the rain-streaked windshield. The metallic taste of fear coated my tongue, and my formal gown felt absurdly out of place in this industrial wasteland. You don't have to do this, Crawford said for the third time, adjusting his earpiece. We can handle the surveillance without putting you at risk. But I was already reaching for the door handle. Those are my kids whose information they stole. If Derek is planning to hurt them, I need to know. The wire taped to my chest felt cold against my skin, and the tiny microphone clipped inside my evening bag seemed impossibly fragile. Senator Williams had returned to the hotel to manage the aftermath of the gala, but not before making me promise to be careful. You've already lost enough to this family, she'd said. Don't let them take your life too. I approached the warehouse from the east side, my heels clicking against the wet pavement despite my efforts to move quietly. Through a grimy window, I could see light spilling from what looked like a makeshift office space. Voices carried on the night air, and I recognized Derek's laugh, the same condescending sound that had haunted my childhood. Told you she was too stupid to figure it out, he was saying as I crept closer to the window. Claire always was the family charity case. Even now, with all her success, she's still that pathetic little girl begging for scraps. I pressed myself against the cold brick wall, rain soaking through my gown as I listened. Through the window, I could see Derek pacing back and forth, his expensive suit rumpled and his tie loosened. But he wasn't alone. My blood turned to ice as I recognized the second figure in the room.
Sarah.
My assistant Sarah, the woman I'd trusted with everything, sat at a folding table with a laptop open in front of her. The same laptop she'd used to show me the suspicious transactions just hours earlier. The client database download is complete, Sarah said, her voice carrying none of the nervousness she displayed at the hotel. We have everything, names, addresses, family situations, psychological profiles. The trafficking contacts will pay premium for this level of detail. Derek stopped pacing and leaned over her shoulder. And the financial transfers? All set to process at midnight. By morning, the foundation's accounts will be empty and the money will be scattered across 12 different offshore accounts. Claire will wake up to find her precious charity bankrupt and under federal investigation. The rain was coming down harder now, but I barely felt it. 3 years of my life, hundreds of young people who trusted us with their stories, their hopes, their futures. All of it had been a lie. Sarah had been there from the beginning, helping me write grant proposals, celebrating our victories, comforting me during the difficult times when funding was tight. What about Claire herself? Derek asked. She's seen too much tonight. The feds are already sniffing around. Sarah's fingers paused over the keyboard. That's not my problem anymore. I've done what you paid me to do. Actually, it is your problem. Derek's voice had turned cold, dangerous. Because if Claire talks, if she connects you to any of this, we all go down. And I'm not going to prison because you got sentimental about your boss. Through the window, I watched Derek pull something from his jacket pocket. Even in the dim light, I could see it was a gun. "Derek, we had a deal," Sarah said, her composure finally cracking. "I give you access to the foundation, you pay me my cut, and I disappear. Nobody gets hurt." Plans change. Derek moved behind her chair, and I saw Sarah's shoulders tense. "You know too much, and frankly, you've outlived your usefulness." I had to move. Whatever Crawford and his team were planning, it wouldn't happen fast enough to save Sarah. Despite everything she'd done, despite the betrayal that felt like a knife in my chest, I couldn't watch Derek murder her in cold blood. My hand found a loose brick near the window. Without allowing myself to think about the consequences, I hurled it through the glass. The crash was deafening in the quiet warehouse. Derek spun toward the window, gun raised, as I rolled through the broken opening and landed hard on the concrete floor. Glass cut through my gown and into my skin, but adrenaline kept me moving. "Claire," Sarah screamed, genuine terror in her voice now. "What are you doing here?" "Stopping you from destroying any more lives," I said, getting to my feet despite the pain shooting through my knees. Blood from the glass cuts was already staining my dress, but I kept my eyes on Derek's gun. Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Look at you, little cousin. Still trying to save everyone. Still too naive to understand how the world really works." "I understand perfectly," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. "You've been using my foundation to launder money from human trafficking. You've stolen information about vulnerable young people to sell to predators. And you've been planning to frame me for all of it." "Very good," Derek said, taking a step closer. "Though you're missing the best part. Do you want to tell her, Sarah, or should I?" Sarah's face was streaked with tears now. "Claire, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "Tell me what?" I demanded. Derek's smile was cruel. "The foundation was never your idea, Claire. It was ours. We needed a legitimate charity run by someone clean, someone with a compelling backstory. The homeless girl who pulled herself up by her bootstraps. It was perfect. Sarah was supposed to guide you, help you build something we could use." The words hit me like physical blows. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Derek continued. "Think about it. How did you get that first grant? The one that got everything started? Sarah suggested you apply, didn't she? And somehow, miraculously, a small foundation with no track record got $50,000 from the Morrison Family Foundation." I looked at Sarah, desperate for her to deny it, but her silence was answer enough. "The Morrison Family Foundation," Derek said, savoring each word, "is another one of our fronts. We've been funding you from the beginning, Claire. Every success, every life you think you've saved, it was all built on blood money." The warehouse seemed to tilt around me. 3 years of my life, everything I'd built, everything I'd believed about myself, it was all a lie. I wasn't a success story. I was a puppet, dancing to strings I'd never even seen. "But here's the thing about puppets," Derek continued, raising the gun. "Eventually, they outlive their usefulness." The sound of the safety clicking off was impossibly loud in the concrete space. I closed my eyes, thinking about all the young people whose lives had been touched by the foundation. Real lives, real hope, even if it had been built on a foundation of lies. "FBI, drop your weapon." The warehouse exploded with light and sound as agents poured through every entrance. Derek spun toward the main door, and in that moment of distraction, Sarah lunged forward and knocked the laptop off the table. It hit the concrete with a satisfying crash. "The backup drives," she shouted to me. "In the filing cabinet. Destroy them." I didn't hesitate. Whatever Sarah's motivations, whatever lies she'd told, she was trying to protect those kids now. I grabbed a crowbar from a nearby workbench and smashed open the filing cabinet, pulling out hard drives and USB sticks, stomping them under my heels until they were nothing but plastic fragments and twisted metal. Derek's gun went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. I heard someone scream, maybe Sarah, maybe me, and then Derek was on the ground, FBI agents swarming over him. "Claire." Crawford's voice cut through the chaos. "Are you hurt?" I looked down at myself, surprised to find I was still standing. The cuts from the glass were bleeding, and my gown was ruined, but I was alive. More importantly, the stolen data was destroyed. The kids, I said, my voice hoarse. Are they safe? We've already contacted local law enforcement in every city where your foundation operates, Crawford assured me. Everyone on that list will be warned and offered protection. As the agents led Derek away in handcuffs, he turned back to me one last time. You think you've won something here, Claire? You think destroying that data changes anything? There are dozens of operations like this, hundreds of charities being used the same way. You've saved a few kids tonight, but you've lost everything else. He was right, and we both knew it. The foundation would have to be dissolved, investigated, torn apart piece by piece. Every program we'd built, every partnership we'd forged, every young person we'd helped, all of it would be tainted by association with Derek's crimes. But as I watched Sarah being led away, not in handcuffs, Crawford had explained, but into protective custody in exchange for her cooperation, I realized Derek was also wrong about something important. I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost the foundation, yes, and the illusion that I'd built something entirely on my own. But I still had the knowledge, the experience, the genuine relationships I'd formed with the young people we'd served. Most importantly, I still had the determination that had carried me from sleeping on park benches to running a multi-million-dollar organization. What happens now? I asked Crawford as we walked toward the warehouse exit. Now you testify, help us build cases against everyone involved in this network. And then, he paused, looking at me with something that might have been respect. Then you decide what comes next. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky. I thought about the Gala guests who were probably just now getting home, about the senator's promise of federal funding that would never come, about the foundation that had been my whole world just 12 hours ago. But I also thought about Marcus, the 17-year-old who'd been living in his car when we found him and was now in his second year of college. About Elena, who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go, and was now managing her own apartment and working toward her nursing degree. About dozens of other young people whose lives had been genuinely changed, regardless of where the money had originally come from. Derek had called me naive, and maybe he was right. Maybe I had been too trusting, too eager to believe in the goodness of family, too willing to accept help without questioning its source. But naivety wasn't always a weakness. Sometimes it was the courage to believe that things could be better, that people could change, that hope was worth fighting for even when the odds were impossible. As Crawford's car pulled away from the warehouse district, I made myself a promise. I would rebuild, but this time I would do it right. No family money, no shortcuts, no compromises. It would take years, maybe decades, but I would create something clean, something real, something that couldn't be corrupted by the greed and cruelty of people like Derek. The sun was fully up by the time we reached the FBI field office, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was going to be a beautiful day, I realized. The kind of day that made you believe in new beginnings. And for the first time in hours, I smiled.